Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me. I want to start with a question. Imagine that someone that you love is dying. There's a medication that could save their life, but the person who owns that medication is charging more money than you could ever afford. You try everything. You ask for help. You try to borrow money. You offer to make payments. You explain the situation. The answer is still no. So now you have a choice. Do you steal the medication? That question comes from the Heinz dilemma, which Lawrence Kohlberg used while studying moral development. However, Kohlberg was not only interested in whether people answered yes or no. He was more interested in why. That distinction is extremely important. Two people can make the exact same decision for completely different reasons. One person might say Heinz should steal the medication because he probably will not get caught. Another person might say he should steal it because preserving a human life is significantly more important than protecting someone's profit. Same answer, completely different levels of moral reasoning. That is really what Kohlberg's theory is all about. It is not simply about whether a person makes the correct moral decision. It is about the reasoning process behind that decision. Kohlberg argued that moral reasoning develops through 6 different stages. Those 6 stages are grouped into 3 larger levels: preconventional morality, conventional morality, and postconventional morality. The basic idea is that our reasons for doing what we believe is right can change as we develop. We may begin by avoiding punishment. Then we may act in ways that benefit us. Later, we may care more about approval, loyalty, law, and social order. Eventually, some people begin questioning whether laws and social expectations are actually just in the first place. Before going any further, I think it is important to say that this theory does not mean people move through the stages perfectly. Human beings are not that simple. A person may reason at a very advanced level in one situation and fall back into selfish or fear-based reasoning in another. Also, sounding moral is not the same as being moral. Someone can give a beautiful speech about justice and compassion and still behave horribly when it actually costs them something. So Kohlberg's theory is useful, but it is not a perfect measurement of whether someone is a good person. The first major level is preconventional morality. At this level, moral decisions are mostly centered around the individual. The person is mainly thinking about consequences, rewards, punishments, and personal benefit. Stage 1 is obedience and punishment. At this stage, something is wrong because the person may get punished for doing it. A child might say stealing is wrong because the police will arrest you. Lying is wrong because your parents will punish you. Breaking the rules is wrong because something bad will happen to you. Using the Heinz dilemma, a person at stage 1 might say Heinz should steal the medication or should not steal the medication because he might go to jail. Or they may say he should steal it if he knows that he could get away with it. That second answer may sound strange, but it's still punish-based reasoning. The concern is not really whether stealing is morally right or wrong. The concern is whether the person will experience negative consequences. The basic question at this stage is, what is going to happen to me? Most people associate this reasoning with children, but adults use it too. If an adult only follows traffic laws because they are afraid of getting a ticket, that is still stage 1 reasoning. If someone only behaves ethically at work because they know a camera is watching, that is still punish-based reasoning or punish-based morality. The person may be doing the right thing, but they are doing it for the most basic possible reasons. Stage 2 is individualism and exchange. At this stage, morality begins to operate more like a transaction. The person recognizes that other people have needs, but the basic reasoning is still, what do I get out of this? I help you, you may help me later. I do you a favor because now you owe me one. I follow the rule because following the rule benefits me. Using the Heinz dilemma, someone at stage 2 may say Heinz should steal the medicine because his wife may repay him in some way later. Another person may argue that the pharmacist has a right to charge whatever he wants because he developed the medication and wants to make money. At this level, fairness is often understood as an equal exchange. You do something for me, and I will do something for you. This is more advanced in stage 1 because the person recognizes that other people have interests too. However, the person is still thinking in a very self-focused way. The moral question becomes, What is fair to me and what do I receive in return? The second major level is conventional morality. At this level, morality is no longer based only on punishment or personal benefit. The person begins thinking about relationships, social expectations, laws, duties, and approval of others. Stage 3 is often called the good boy or good girl stage, but a better description is good interpersonal relationships. At this stage, people want to be viewed as good, loyal, caring, dependable, trustworthy. The person may make a decision because they want their family to respect them. They may follow the expectations of their friend group. They may act in a certain way because that is what a good husband, wife, soldier, parent, student, or employee is supposed to do. In the Heinz dilemma, someone at stage 3 might say Heinz should steal the medicine because a good husband would do anything possible to save his wife. Another person might say he should not steal because good people do not break the law. The important part is that the reasoning is based on relationships and social approval. This stage can involve real compassion and loyalty. Those are not bad values. However, the weakness is that people can become too dependent on approval. Sometimes the group is wrong. Sometimes the family is wrong. Sometimes the culture is wrong. Sometimes the institutions are wrong. If a person only asks, what will people around me think, they may never stop to ask whether the expectation itself is moral. When I think about my own development, I can see this stage clearly in my childhood. My father and grandfather taught me the importance of service. They taught me that being a man was not just about talking tough or looking strong. It was about being dependable. It was about showing up. It was about helping people when you were in a position to help. At that age, part of my morality came from wanting to live up to their example. I wanted them to view me as a good son and eventually as a good man. That is stage 3 reasoning, but that does not make the lesson any less valuable. The lesson was real. The reasoning simply began through relationships and approval. Stage 4 is maintaining social order, sometimes called the law and order stage. At this stage, morality becomes broader than personal relationships. The person begins thinking about society, institutions, laws, responsibility, and duty. The reasoning is that society cannot function if everyone decides that the rules only apply to them when they feel like following them. That is a legitimate point. Laws matter, standards matter, duty matters, and responsibilities matter. Using the Heinz dilemma, someone at stage 4 may argue that Heinz should not steal the medication because stealing is illegal. Even if his situation is painful, society will become unstable if everyone broke laws whenever they personally believed they had a good reason to. I understand stage 4 reasoning very well because of my military experience. The military depends on structure. It depends on people understanding their roles. It depends on discipline, standards, lawful orders, and responsibility. As a combat medic, I could not simply decide that I only wanted to perform my responsibilities when I was comfortable, rested, or emotionally prepared. People depended on me. The mission depended on everyone doing what they were supposed to do. In that environment, duty is not some abstract word from a textbook. Duty becomes very real when failing to perform your responsibility can get someone hurt or killed. The Army did not teach me the value of service from nothing. My father and grandfather had already taught me that. The Army proved what they taught me. However, stage 4 has a serious limitation. Law and morality are not always the same thing. History has given us more than enough examples of actions that were legal and still morally wrong. Slavery was legal. Segregation was legal. Governments have passed laws allowing discrimination, political repression, and abuse. So while law and social order are necessary, obedience by itself is not enough. A person can follow every order and every law and still participate in something immoral. That is where postconventional morality begins. The third major level is postconventional morality. At this level, people begin asking whether laws, customs, and expectations are actually justified. Instead of assuming that society defines morality, the person begins evaluating society according to broader moral principles. Stage 5 is a social contract and individual rights. At this stage, people recognize that laws are necessary, but laws are created by human beings. Because human beings create laws, human beings can also create unjust laws. The purpose of law should be to protect people, preserve rights, and promote the welfare of society. When a law fails to do so, well, the law should be questioned, challenged, or changed. Using Heinz's dilemma, someone at stage 5 may say Heinz should steal the medication because the right to life is more important than the pharmacist's property rights. That does not mean property rights do not matter. It means rights sometimes come into conflict. And some rights may carry more moral weight than others in a specific situation. Stage 5 reasoning does not mean everyone gets to ignore any laws they dislike. That would not be moral reasoning. That would just be chaos. Instead, stage 5 asks whether the law serves the value it claims to protect. Is the law just? Does it treat people equally? Does it protect legitimate rights? Does it benefit society? Does it unnecessarily harm people? This is where I believe much of my own reasoning falls today. I respect laws, structures, institutions, and responsibility, but I no longer believe those things should be accepted without examination. Authority has to justify itself. A law has to justify itself. A policy has to justify itself. A moral rule has to survive questions. That doesn't mean automatically rejecting everything. It means refusing to confuse tradition or authority with truth. Stage 6 is universal ethical principles. This is Kohlberg's highest stage. At this level, moral decisions are based on internally accepted principles such as justice, equality, human dignity, compassion, and respect for life. These principles are not supposed to apply only when they benefit us. They're supposed to apply consistently. That is the difficult part, because it's easy to believe in free speech when the person speaking agrees with you. It is harder when they do not. It is easy to believe in fairness when fairness benefits your side. It is harder when fairness requires you to admit that your side is wrong. It is easy to believe that evidence matters when the evidence supports your position. It is harder when the evidence undermines something you strongly believe. In the Heinz dilemma, someone at stage 6 may argue that saving a human life is moral obligation because human life has inherent value. That principle would apply not only to his wife, but to anyone in his situation. This stage connects to the idea that moral principle must be universal. I cannot demand honesty from other people while giving myself permission to lie whenever lying helps me. I cannot criticize bias in another person while ignoring my own bias. I cannot demand justice only when I am the person being treated unfairly. That is not moral principle. That is a self-interest wearing a moral costume. I believe I sometimes reason towards stage 6, but I would be careful about claiming that I live there permanently. That would be dishonest. Human beings are emotional. We are tribal. We are defensive. We protect our egos. We become attached to our beliefs. I do too. The goal is not pretending I am above those weaknesses. The goal is recognizing them before they make the decision for me. One recent example involves the way I approach research and controversial issues. There have been times when I strongly believed one side of an argument was correct. Then, while researching, I found evidence that complicated my position quite a bit. At that moment, I had a moral decision to make. Do I only present the evidence that supports me? Do I ignore the study's limitations because they weaken my argument? Do I frame the opposing side in the weakest possible way so it benefits and it becomes easier for me to attack the other side? Or do I present the evidence honestly, including the parts that may not help me? I have made a decision to include limitations and disagreements, not because it always makes my argument stronger. Sometimes it does quite the opposite. But if I'm going to criticize manipulation, confirmation bias, and dishonesty in other people, I cannot give myself permission to do the exact same thing. That reasoning reflects stage 5 and possibly elements of stage 6. It is based on fairness, truth, and the principle that the audience deserves accurate information. Kohlberg's theory is extremely useful, but it has its weaknesses. Ventaglia, Fontaine, and Penguin examine moral reasoning across different cultures. Their review explains that preconventional and conventional reasoning appear across societies, but cultures may define moral maturity differently. Western societies often emphasize individual rights, autonomy, and justice. Other cultures may place more emphasis on family obligations, community, loyalty, social harmony, religion, or respect for elders. That creates an important criticism. Kohlberg may have treated one specific style of moral reasoning, especially Western Justin-based reasoning, as the highest possible form. But someone who emphasizes community, relationships, and responsibility is not automatically less morally developed. Context matters. culture matters. Relationships matter. Emotions matter. Carol Gilligan also criticized theories that focus too heavily on rules and justice while undervaluing care, compassion, and relationships. Another limitation is that moral reasoning and moral behavior are not the same thing. A person may understand every one of Kohlberg's stages and still behave selfishly. A person may know exactly what justice requires and still choose to do what is convenient for them. Knowing better does not guarantee doing better. That may be one of the hardest truths in moral psychology. Ultimately, Kohlberg's theory helps us understand that moral development is not only about changing our answers, it is about changing our reasons. A child may tell the truth because they are afraid of punishment. A teenager may tell the truth because they want to be viewed as a good person. An adult may tell the truth because society depends on trust. A person reasoning from moral universal principles may tell the truth because other human beings deserve not to be manipulated. Same action, different reasoning. When I apply the theory to myself, I can see movement from stage 3 through stage 4 and more recently towards stage 5. My childhood emphasized approval, relationships, and becoming the kind of person my father and grandfather taught me to become. My military service strengthened my understanding of duty, responsibility, structure, and social order. My experience since then has taught me that duty and authority are important, but they are not automatically moral. Today, I try to judge decisions according to justice, compassion, evidence, honesty, and human dignity. I do not always succeed, but I believe moral development requires more than claiming to have principles. It requires testing those principles when they become inconvenient. So the most important question in Kohlberg's theory is not simply, what do I believe is right? The more important question is, why do I believe it is right? Am I afraid of punishment? Am I looking for a reward? Do I want approval? Am I blindly following authority? Am I protecting the rights and welfare of society? Or am I applying principles consistently even when applying it costs me something? That final question is where moral reasoning stops being theoretical. That is where it becomes a reflection of who we actually are. Thank you.